Well, welcome everyone. I'm Don Kinzler. I'm the NDSU Extension Horticulture Agent here in Cass County. And thank you for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed this series of webinars as much as I've enjoyed visiting with each of you. Tonight is the last of my 5 webinar series, and I'm excited to talk about lawn care. I don't know about you, but I cannot wait to smell that aroma of freshly cut grass. I cannot wait for our lawns to green up. So it's going to be enjoyable to talk about all the things that we can do to care for our lawns, kind of starting from spring, going all the way through fall, kind of the when-tos we should be doing. So again, thank you very much for tuning in. And now let's get started. The humans and lawns go back a long ways. Sometimes the question is, well, when did we actually kind of start maintaining lawns? And I thought it'd be fun just to give a quick little synopsis of the history of lawns. Well, it actually started back in medieval times in castles. You could not have marauding war time people coming up, sneaking up on your castle if you had a lot of dense underbrush and a lot of shrubbery and things around. So it became customary to clear cut around the castle so you could see who was coming up to it. And then also that provided area that livestock could be grazed on that area as well. And then it became a status symbol on the estates of the wealthy. If you could have a well manicured lawn, that meant you you had come a long way. And of course, that translated into the United States here as well. In the early days of our country, if you could have a well manicured lawn, then that was quite a status symbol. Of course, a nice house wasn't bad either. But that also meant a lot of labor. Of course, you could have livestock grazing in your front yard, but that wasn't really a status symbol. So a lot of the manicure of the lawns had to be done by hand labor. Now, in World War I, they actually did have sheep grazing on the front lawn of the White House to keep that neatly mowed. But along came the invention of the lawnmower. In the late 1800s, all of a sudden, the lawnmower became something that us everyday ordinary people could have. And all of a sudden, with this simple invention that wasn't too expensive, all of us could have a lawn that we could trim and mow and make our homes look nice out in front. And so after World War II, the birth of the American suburbs, you can almost hear the clickety click of that push type mower with the gentleman there. And of course, just kind of classic, the birth of the American suburbs. And along with those neat homes was a neat lawn out in front. And of course, we can do the same things today. Many of us enjoy our lawns. Now, there are a lot of things to be said about having a lawn. They do provide lots of benefits. Uh, sometimes lawns can get a bad rap in that sometimes it's felt that they consume a lot of resources. But we're going to look at ways in our program today to cut down the inputs and actually have a beautiful lawn with less work and less resources put into those lawns. And so lawns do provide some very good benefits to us. So there's a good rationale for having lawns. And one of those is it prevents erosion. An area with a nice tight turf certainly does prevent the soil from washing away. And it catches the runoff from hard surfaces like sidewalks and parking lots and driveways. It catches the runoff and it catches and break down pollutants that may be on those surfaces. Also, it improves the soil below. The thatch, the breakdown of the thatch and the root system working through the soil. If you've ever, even in a heavy clay soil, if you've ever dug up an area of lawn or sod that's been there a while, the even heavy clay soil is quite nice and crumbly underneath that lawn. So it does do some good soil improvement. And of course, it helps reduce noise in our neighborhoods. It has a cooling effect. It helps trap heat. An area of lawn is much cooler, of course, than an area of blacktop or concrete. It adds visual appeal. Sometimes I like to consider a home lawn as a canvas on which the rest of the landscape can be featured. Whether it's a shrubbery, whether it's a flower garden, whether it's a pollinator garden, but a lawn can provide kind of the canvas on which the rest of it is built. Good surface for playing. Again, grass grasses are plants. And so, with all these millions of grass plants, they're doing good things to our environment. In fact, it's interesting. They analyzed the oxygen produced by grass, and a square that's 5 foot by 5 foot square produces enough oxygen for an adult for a day. So they do a good job of producing oxygen for us. And of course, a good surface for playing, gosh, for kids, kickball and soccer, wonderful area. And so they're in our landscapes and our towns and our cities and our yards, there's places for lawns. There's also plenty of places for natural areas, natural meadows, pollinator gardens, flowers, vegetable gardens. So there's plenty of room for all of it. I know once in a while a person will see on social media if someone shows some lawn care, sometimes there'll be adverse reaction that well, that should be torn up and planted to other like native plants or something. But again, there's room for it all. There's room for lawns in the right location. There's room for pollinated gardens and native plantings. There's plenty of room for all of it. There are very few plants that aren't contributing to something. I guess we could have the discussion on whether Canada thistle and quackgrass contribute much, but all these other plantings have very good uses. Sometimes lawns might be a preferred choice. As I mentioned, look at this beautiful landscape. The lawn is a perfect canvas on which these beautiful shrubs and plantings are placed. Lawns can be easier to maintain because, just simply mowing, you don't have to put a lot of inputs into a lawn. Simply mowing it can keep it quite nice. They're quite easy to install, easy to seed or sod. So it's something all of us can do ourselves on our lawn. When we moved our house onto a lot, let's see, it's been about almost 10 years. We seeded the whole lawn ourselves with a little seeder, so it doesn't have to be high-tech equipment or anything. And so for many people, a lawn might be a successful choice. Sometimes it might be really nice to plant like a native flower planting in front of one's lawn. But also that type of planting requires maintenance as well. The thistle and quackgrass grow in those the same as they do most anywhere else, and the dandelions invade those too. And so it kind of depends on, how much maintenance, the level of maintenance, in some of the beautiful native plantings. Um, Sometimes it can be a little bit of a learning curve to see now in those native plantings, what are the native plants and what are some of the weed species that I might not be familiar with. So again, my point is that there's plenty of room for all of us, plenty of room for those that like lawns, plenty of room for those that like native plantings. I like some of all of it. I've got quite an amount of our yard devoted to vegetable gardens and flower gardens, and I use the lawn kind of in between it all. So let's start in with kind of a calendar, starting in early spring, about this time of year, and we'll go right on through the fall. So when do we do some of these good things for our lawns? Well, in the springtime here, very shortly, many of us will be raking our lawn. So now it's important not to start raking the lawn too early. It should be allowed to dry and firm up a little bit because if a person starts raking too early, a person might risk tearing up some of that moist, tender grass. So, kind of an old rule of thumb was if you kneel down on the lawn and if you get a wet spot on your jeans, then it's maybe a little too wet. So, let it dry and come back another day. So the goal in the spring of the year is oftentimes just to fluff up that matted grass. Under the snow, many of our lawns, you've probably noticed as I have on ours, that as the snow disappears, gosh, some of those areas are really matted down. And just a little bit of a fluff up gets the air in it. Also, snow mold. We'll take a look at a snow mold picture in a minute, but snow mold can be greatly reduced just by a leaf rake fluffed up. Now, I should mention, we're going to talk about power raking in just a minute, but power raking should be delayed. The early spring, well, the grass is still kind of half dormant. Power raking is too aggressive. It could easily tear up that lawn. So we're going to delay with power raking just a little bit yet. Now, here's the snow mold that I was talking about. This is quite a severe case. It was over on 8th Street in Fargo a couple of years ago. Now, snow mold is gray, the grayish kind of web-like material you see. Sometimes it's got a pinkish cast to it. It's a fungus type disorder, and it thrives during the winter time under fairly heavy snow cover. It comes more often if we get snow quite early in the winter before the ground is totally cold and frozen solid. Oftentimes when we get that first couple of snows and when the ground is almost still a little bit warm, then that's a great area for these fungi to thrive under the snow. And then when the snow disappears, this is what you see. The antidote is quite easy. It's simply to use that rake, kind of a leaf type rake, and as soon as you can, as soon as it's kind of dry enough so it doesn't seem like you're pulling up grass, but as soon as it's at just the right amount of dryness, go in with a leaf type rake and just fluff it up. And almost immediately, that snow mold, once it's aerated, gets air into it, it almost disappears and looks almost instantly good again. Since the fungus is already established, fungicides don't do any good at this point. If a person consistently has snow mold damage that starts, then there are fungicides that can be applied in the fall of the year before snow comes. Oh, next, oftentimes this time of year, we will get vole damage. Now, that's me a couple of years ago out trying to rake away the loose grass from vole damage. If you see those surface channels. Now, this was done a couple of years ago. I wrote a forum newspaper garden column. I'm not usually out in the lawn. Uh, I usually dress a little more casually when I'm out in the lawn, but to do the forum photo shoot, I left the office, went home quick, met the photographer, grabbed a leaf rake, and we started photographing. I wanted them to photograph just the rake, uh, kind of showing the channels, but they captured all of me. So anyway, I usually garden a little less dressed up than what you see there. So, but anyway, if you focus on those channels that the voles make, they work under the snow cover all winter long, chewing away the grass. Now, usually they don't eat far enough down into the grass crown, that's the spot between the kind of leaves and the roots. They don't usually eat enough to totally kill that grass. So about the best thing to do is rake away the grass that they've created the loose mess with, and then just let the grass come. Our bluegrass lawns have a tremendous ability to fill in sideways. And so those little channels, even if they did chew really far down into the ground, they'll usually fill in from the side. Or if they haven't gone all the way down into the ground, and there's some live root and crown there, the grass will usually regrow. Person could always sprinkle a little seed in those areas too. Now, lucky this year, when the snow disappeared, I don't see any vole damage in our lawn. And I thought, good, maybe the vole population has decreased because it is cyclical. But now I'm getting emails from people with vole damage. On the left-hand side of your screen, a gentleman in Fargo just emailed me yesterday with vole damage, and look what a mess they'd made. So now the kind of raised channels there, the voles must have chewed away, and so that's probably going to be loose. So after this mess dries, person won't be able to do anything now, but after this kind of wet area dries, then the person would just take a rake away everything that is loose and assess it and see, probably sprinkle a little grass seed in the first part of May. So, how do we prevent voles? Well, in the fall of the year, we'll talk about cutting the lawn short for the last mowing. That does help, reduces a little bit of cover, although it looks like the gentleman that sent this in looks like it was fairly low. I don't see a lot of real thick grass, so he must have cut it fairly low. So they'll attack regardless. Um, so a person can use or you can use rodent traps in the areas kind of along the perimeter. I see this looks like it was probably along a building. I think I see a bottom part of a wall maybe in the corner. And so traps can be put. A person can use poison baits. I always put poison baits inside a PVC tube so that the voles would crawl in and that any poison bait is not accessible to pets or children. And poison baits do need to be used kind of with caution because if our good predatory birds, such as owls and hawks, if they pick up a vole that has died from poison, of course, that can also poison the good predatory birds. So again, if poison is tucked inside, hopefully the vole would kind of die in that enclosure as well. And sometimes that's why traps can be very effective because then that holds then the vole without the owls or hawks being able to get to it because we certainly don't want to disrupt them. That's one of the best nature's control is with our predatory birds on voles. Voles do run in cycles, so hopefully at some point the cycle will be over. Because the numbers have been tremendous the last number of years. All right, the next target date is about April 15th. That is the date, kind of easy to remember, tax day, to apply crabgrass preventer. Now, crabgrass preventer, such as you see the product there, they're sold at garden centers and chain stores. Crabgrass preventer. Now, it's important to understand how crabgrass works. Crabgrass is an annual grass that sprouts each year in our lawns from seed that was deposited previous years. So it's growing from seed. So the crabgrass preventer is a product that is applied before that seed sprouts. And if applied at the proper time, then it creates kind of a layer, a protective layer in the soil. So when that crabgrass begins to sprout, it's immediately killed. But it's very important that that crabgrass preventer is in place before the crabgrass starts to sprout, the seed. Now, crabgrass seed starts to sprout when the temperature is approaching about 50 degrees or so. So a person can use soil thermometer to check the temperature of your soil. I use a regional soil temperature gauge called NDAWN, NDAWN. So a person can just search online for NDAWN soil temperature, and it gives North Dakota, Minnesota, probably 60 sites around the area. So you can just click on the nearest site to you, and it will tell what the soil temperature is from about the 2-inch level all the way down to, I think, about 8 feet. So it's kind of interesting to see how much frost is in the ground and how the soil warmth is progressing. So the crabgrass preventer needs to be in place before your soil is getting it to about 50 degrees. Now, if it's put on too early, it may become inactive by the time the crabgrass is going to sprout. So there's danger of putting it on too early. And if it's too late, the crabgrass has already sprouted and it won't be killed. Another important tip is to really follow the directions well. Most of the granular crabgrass preventers need to be activated with moisture. So applying it before we're going to get some rain, and some rain meaning about between a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch at least. If it's a dry spring, then a person should irrigate with a 1/4 to a 1/2 inch of rain. That moisture of sprinkling, that moisture is really important to create that blanket of protection on the soil. If it's not activated, then the crabgrass will be able to just go right on through it. Now, the question is it crabgrass? Crabgrass is the term crabgrass is sometimes used as a catch-all term inappropriately for any wide-bladed weedy grass in our lawns. So it's important to know what is truly crabgrass, because each year I do get some emails from people indicating that we applied the crabgrass preventer at the right time, we watered it in, but we still have crabgrass. Well, sometimes it ends up being quackgrass. So let's take a look at how to tell if something is crabgrass. Okay, the photo on the left is crabgrass. It's kind of a lighter green. Because it has to grow from seed each spring, new each spring, it usually does not show up in the lawn. Okay, it's starting to think about germinating about the middle of April. And so sometime in May, depending on the year, it'll start becoming visible. It's commonly mistaken um, or mistakenly referred to uh, crabgrass as quackgrass. So if quackgrass, the easiest way that I tell quackgrass is to dig it up, and it has pearly white or tannish white rhizomes underneath. Now, quackgrass is a perennial, winter hardy perennial grass that comes back each year from an established root system. And so quackgrass tends to green up at the same time or even a little earlier than the rest of your lawn grass. So the point being, if something right away in spring is greening up and it's a weedy, wide-bladed grass, chances are it's quackgrass and not crabgrass, because crabgrass takes a little longer to be visible. And also, if you just dig down and look for those pearly white rhizomes. So now, crabgrass on the left-hand side, since that grows from seed, that can be controlled by putting down crabgrass preventer. Quackgrass on the right-hand side of the screen, quackgrass is not controlled in the slightest by crabgrass control, because it's coming back from a healthy root system and not from seed. So it's important to distinguish which of the two. Now, quackgrass you see kind of infiltrating the lawn like the photo there. Crabgrass on the left-hand side, crabgrass oftentimes will grow where the rest of the lawn is more thin, maybe along driveways and sidewalks, area where the grass just isn't quite as nice. Maybe it was damaged a little bit by snow removal. Or the heat of the driveway sometimes will diminish the edges of a lawn, and then crabgrass can set in where that lawn is thinner. Now, quackgrass. How do we control quackgrass in a lawn? Well, wouldn't it be nice if there was a product? But there are no products that will selectively kill quackgrass in a lawn without also damaging the good grass. So glyphosate, the original Roundup, could be used, but it means that then you'll have to reseed clumps. One nice thing about glyphosate is it's deactivated by soil. So as soon as the quack grass and that clump of grass is killed, then it can be reseeded. But again, there are no products that will selectively, for homeowners, kill. There was a product a number of years ago that was being used on golf courses and things for quackgrass control, but it proved to be too damaging to our bluegrass lawns, so it's not available. Another weedy grass that oftentimes seen is tall fescue. Now, tall fescue oftentimes shows up in the middle of summer when our lawns, especially the non-irrigated lawns, start looking a little bit dry and going a little dormant. But tall fescue is so deeply rooted that it stays nice and green. And it is a clump type grass, so it does not wander throughout like quackgrass does. So look at those neat clumps. This was a photo from Purdue University of tall fescue. Now, one neat thing is there are turf type tall fescues. Kind of from the idea of, well, if you can't beat it, join it. If it stays that nice and green in the middle of a drought, why not just plant tall fescue? Well, the turf breeders have come up with a turf type tall fescue that's kind of a little finer, a little more, uh, I guess, a little more visually appealing. And so if you plant your entire lawn to turf type tall fescue, that's an option too. It maybe isn't quite as nice looking as a Kentucky bluegrass lawn, but I've seen some turf type tall fescue lawns and they are beautiful. And so I'm going to do a little experimenting myself because our lawn, I don't have a sprinkler system or anything, and in the middle of summer, if it gets dry, my lawn starts getting a little kind of brownish. I'd rather have something green. Tall fescue is so deeply rooted. So I'm going to do a little experimenting. I'm going to plant an area in our own yard of turf type tall fescue and see what it does. So, well, if you don't like these clumps in your lawn, they can simply be dug out or treated with glyphosate and then reseed. Whether you dig it out or treat it with glyphosate, usually then you do need to reseed that area as well. So where does this come from? Well, it's a contaminant in some seed mixes. We're going to talk about buying quality seed mixes in a minute. And so it can be a contaminant in the original seed mix as well. I suppose it's conceivable too that if it's growing and allowed to go to seed somewhere, the birds might spread it as well. Now let's talk about seeding. We're up to about May 1st. Grass seed, whether it's areas you need to fill in or whether you've got a whole brand new lawn to do, May 1st or after is a good time to seed. Now, the good bluegrasses and fescues need warm soil to sprout, soil that's gotten above maybe 50 to 55 degrees. So it doesn't pay to seed too early in the springtime because that'll just give the sparrows something to nibble on. So delay until the soil has gotten warm enough for germination above maybe 55 degrees. Let the soil warm up and then do your seeding, and then it will sprout that much quicker. Oh, now here, it's important to buy quality seed. Lawns can be in place for hundreds of years. How long does a lawn last? There's no reason why it shouldn't last 100 years, several hundred years. So it pays when you're starting to buy quality seed. You definitely get what you pay for. Grass seed is not the spot to scrimp. I'm as frugal as the next guy, but I always buy the highest quality seed. And usually when you're looking for grass seed on the shelf at a garden center or the national chains, the good grass seed is probably the most expensive, and it's well worth a few extra bucks. A good high quality grass seed, if it's full sun, should have about 50% Kentucky bluegrass cultivars or more, but kind of somewhere around the 50%. Now, there will be different named varieties of Kentucky bluegrass. So if you look at the package and add up those cultivars of Kentucky bluegrass, those names should be 50% or more. For shade, you'll find things like fescues. And now, for our area, we are lucky because within North Dakota and Minnesota, there are at least two local seed distributors. One is Agassi Seed in West Fargo. They distribute throughout North Dakota, Minnesota, South Dakota. Agassi Seed, Agasiz, and Rivard Seed, Rivard. Agassi Seed and Rivard Seed. You'll find both of those brands oftentimes in garden centers, chain stores, hardware stores. And if anyone knows of any other local companies in our region, let me know. It's always nice to have companies such as that have kind of specially selected grasses for our area. You know, the United States, the grasses that grow in the upper Midwest are not the grasses that grow down south. So it's important to have grass blends that are specially tailored to our area. So when seeding grass, you can just rake it into the surface. You know you've seeded grass well if you can still see some of the grass seed on this surface. Grass seed generally needs some light in order to germinate. That's why it's not planted deeply like many other types of seed, but just kind of raked into the surface. You can put a little mulch on the top, straw, some of the mulch type that is created for on top of grass seed. All of these things can help preserve moisture because the single most important key to getting a good stand of grass is keeping the surface of the soil, what I like to call dark moist. Because grass seed is just seeded very close to the surface or right on the surface almost, it is very sensitive to drying out. If that grass seed starts to sprout a little bit and then dries out on a hot, windy spring day, it can totally fry and be killed. So keeping that surface dark moist, um, extremely important. Now that might mean watering at least twice a day, morning and evening. That's why mulch can be very, very helpful to keep that surface moist, just a little thin layer of mulch on that. So again, I can't emphasize enough the importance of keeping that surface dark moist so that that grass seed will sprout and sprout uniformly across because it's fun to see that grass seed come up. It is fun. It's actually fun and enjoyable to seed your own area. Okay, now in May, the weeds start growing. A very effective way for many of us in our home lawns to do weed control is simple spot treatment. Many of our lawns, especially those of us that like to kind of do it yourself, since many of our lawns aren't a solid carpet of weeds, it doesn't take too long to go along with a little pump sprayer and just hit the weeds. Um, most of the most of the lawn weed herbicides are not preventative. They control weeds by actually targeting a weed that's growing. So that's why just going along and spot spraying where you see the weeds is quite effective. And uh, so again, most of our homeowner products are not preventing, so then it's pointless to spray the grass areas where there are not weeds growing. So again, less inputs needed on the lawn. And of course, digging is, if you can get deep enough onto those roots, digging is always an alternative too for weeds in the lawn. Some of the weeds, such as Canada thistle, though, of course, those roots are probably 8 foot down, and so digging might slow it down, but it oftentimes is not the total answer for some weeds. Now, weed and feed. It's an interesting concept of putting down fertilizer and weed control all in one step. but it can be quite expensive, and it's oftentimes less effective than a liquid type herbicide. Each year, I do get some emails from people who applied weed and feed, and they were disappointed in that it didn't have effect on the weeds. Most of the weed and feed products, uh, it's interesting. I'm looking at that bag and it mentions kills the weeds and not the lawn. So that's good. I'm happy it's not going to kill the lawn. So it's interesting when you read the label, the way that those little granules, the little dry granules of weed killer that are mixed in with fertilizer, the way that they kill the weeds is they have to stick to the weeds. So the label usually indicates to apply when the lawn has dew on it, or to first sprinkle the lawn and then, while it's still wet, apply the weed and feed. The little tiny granules, and of course they're mixed in the fertilizer and the weed control type herbicide granules, um, has to stick onto the actively growing weeds in order to kill it. Most of these products are not weed preventers. The weeds, dandelions, etc., have to be actively growing, and the little granules have to stick onto the leaves in order to kill them. So it does mean that we're blanketing the entire lawn with an herbicide type product, and maybe herbicide isn't needed over all the lawn if the entire lawn isn't covered with weeds. So again, it's kind of important to understand the means of control of the weed and feed. It might be more economical to just fertilize and spot spray the weeds. There's a picture of the little granules. There's a mixture of fertilizer and weed control in there, but they have to stick onto that dandelion leaf. Okay, now in mid-May, I mentioned power raking, also known as dethatching. So we mentioned in April, as soon as it dries enough, kind of fluffing things up with a lawn rake. But dethatching or power raking, since it is a fairly heavy duty, aggressive operation, is best done mid-May or after the lawn is actively growing and has firmed up. Otherwise, it can actually tear up some of the grass. So the recommendations from NDSU and University of Minnesota are to delay dethatching or power raking until mid-May, even towards the end of May if it's been a cool spring. Now, dethatching lifts up all the fluff out of there, and after it has done that, that of course material needs to be raked off and put on the compost pile or used to mulch the garden if it has not been if herbicide has not been applied to that area, then that would be a good mulch type area that could be used on flower gardens or a vegetable garden. So how do you know if your lawn should be power raked or dethatched? Well, a good way to do it is to just cut a little wedge out of the soil profile. The thatch layer is the tannish layer of undecomposed, kind of deadish grass between the grass blades and the soil. So you see the thatch layer there. Now, a certain amount of thatch is beneficial. The right amount of thatch, which is about a half an inch, helps conserve moisture. It shades the roots, helps block out weeds. So we do want some thatch. Now, if the thatch decomposes fast enough, and as it decomposes, it adds good stuff down into the soil, releases nutrients and things. So if you never have a buildup of more than a half an inch of thatch, you might never need to power rake a lawn. And some lawns grow beautifully, never having been power raked. But again, you let the thatch layer measurement determine. If thatch gets greater than a half an inch, it can be blocking water penetration down in. It can cause more fungus type diseases. Fertilizer won't penetrate as well. And so we hit for that half an inch layer. It's good. More than that, maybe power raking would help a lot. Also in May, core aeration can be done. Again, not to be done too early while the lawn is still moist and tender, but core aeration, that's the operation where that piece of equipment pulls up all the little kind of pellets of soil and thatch. Now, after this operation, those little pellets are left in place. They'll just kind of disintegrate and go back into, there's a lot of good nutrients and things in that little plug. It's a mixture of thatch and soil and good microbes. And so that is left on. So why would you do core aeration? Well, heavy traffic areas that have become compacted, this will help break up that profile. It allows water and nutrients to get down in. And so if a lawn just looks like it's compacted, maybe it has more thatch than is desired, then core aeration can certainly help. Now, what about spring fertilizer? Older recommendations for lawn fertilizing used to be to apply lawn fertilizer early in the spring to get the grass to green up. But then a lot of research was done on this, and they determined that the preferred time to fertilize a lawn is around Memorial Day. So we're looking closer towards the end of May. When and if fertilizer is applied much earlier, before the lawn is actively growing and ready to use it, a lot of that fertilizer goes to waste. It may just run down the drain, run off the lawn, down the drain, because the lawn isn't ready to use it. The grass isn't growing that active. And nitrogen, which most lawn fertilizers, a main component is nitrogen. Nitrogen moves around a lot. And by waiting to fertilize the lawn until the lawn is nice and actively growing, you've maybe mowed it a couple times already by Labor Day, that lawn is growing vigorously, that's when it can immediately start using the nitrogen, and then it won't go to waste. So in the spring fertilizer, that's been shown to be the best time. And the fertilizer type spreaders, the fertilizer bag will usually tell what setting, depending on what brand of the fertilizer spreaders. Personally, I like the spreader on the right-hand side that drops the granules. It can be used for seeding also, but it drops the granules down. The equipment on the left, the called a cyclone, it kind of whirls it out, and it can spread more of the fertilizer on sidewalks and driveways. Although some of the newer models have kind of an edge protector, it's called. So if you do it right, then you're not sending fertilizer all over your driveway. But I do kind of like that drop spreader that does drop it right in place. All right, in May already, set the mowing height to 3 inches. The first mowing or so, a person can do a little shorter just to kind of clean it up, but then the target height is 3 inches or even a little greater. Now, the reason for this is, well, and by the way, this is one of the simplest things we can do to improve the overall health of our lawn is simply to raise the mowing height up to 3 inches or even a hair above that, because it does a couple of things. It, since it's a little higher, it shades out and suppresses weeds. So then we don't have to put as much weed control product on. It reduces the evaporation because it shades the roots, keeps the roots cool. A healthier root system is produced, a deeper root system that we'll look at in just a minute. And so just simply raising that height. It's interesting. If we mow low, it's been shown that low mowing causes shallow roots. And if our lawn has shallow roots, it's not able to access the moisture and the nutrients from down below. So here's an interesting photo of what happens. Okay, when you mow your lawn very short, the roots are very short and shallow. The farther up you go, with the more grass top, the more it's been able to produce a good deep root. Okay, now, we're not advocating for never mowing your lawn, of course, to get a deep root system. But if we target 3.5 inches, that produces a good deep root system. And again, that deep root system is going to be able to take up moisture out of the soil profile better and a much healthier turf. Lots of good benefits just simply by mowing higher. It's interesting. There were studies done too. Sometimes one might think, well, gosh, if I raise the mowing height like that, don't I have to mow more often? But actually, research was done on that, and a lower mowing height causes homeowners to mow more often. They actually did research study on that, and to keep a lawn at a lower height, you're actually having to mow it more often. Um, and so that was interesting. Well, what about bagging up the grass clippings? Well, your lawn certainly isn't going to die if you do bag up the grass clippings, but a good case could be made for not bagging up the grass clippings and just letting them filter back in. The lawn clippings add nutrients. As they decompose, the clippings from one season's mowing, as they break down, they release the equivalent of about one fertilizing. So as they decompose down in, they're releasing nutrients. They help suppress weeds. As they decompose, it's like composting your lawn. And so it kind of creates a layer there that will suppress the weeds, helps conserve moisture, helps keep the roots cooler, and we don't have to haul our clippings to the kind of compost collection site. Um, yeah, I know some people kind of enjoy collecting the clippings because they've got their own compost bin in the corner and they like to harvest those clippings for compost. But unless you're kind of saving them special for composting, it's just as well to return those clippings back into the lawn. So let's talk about summertime. We've already reached summer. Well, what about watering? Now, our Kentucky bluegrass lawns are able to go dormant if it gets dry and hot, and as long as it's not an extended drought, they will come back out of that when the adequate moisture returns. But if a person would like to keep the lawn green, then the target is 1 inch per week of moisture. Boy, if we would get a 1 inch rain every 7 to 10 days, we'd never have to really water our lawns. They'd stay beautiful. So the target is about an inch every week in one application. Now, the reason for in one application, because that 1 inch would penetrate down in and go deeply. If a person is doing frequent shallow sprinklings, like less than an inch, if we're doing frequent shallow sprinkling, such as 3 or 4 times a week, the roots stay at that shallow level. They get kind of hooked on that watering. So rather than going deep down in and searching for moisture, they stay close to the surface, and it creates a less healthy turf profile. Now, in sandy soils, a person may want to divide that 1 inch into two. Twice a week. So the goal is to water less often, but water deeper and penetrate the soil profile with the moisture. Now, how do you know how long does it take to apply an inch of moisture? Well, everybody's sprinkler differs, everybody's sprinkler system, or I don't have a sprinkler system, so I just use sprinklers and hose. So everybody's sprinkler is different. So there's an easy way to tell how long you have to run your sprinkler, and that's by using a straight-sided can, like a tuna can, which is about 1 inch deep. Put a couple of tuna cans out under your sprinkler area and see how long it takes to catch an inch. And then you'll know about how long you need to run your sprinklers to apply 1 inch to those areas. Best time to water lawns is usually early morning so that you apply the moisture and it will penetrate down in, but then the sun will come up and it will dry the surface of that. It's less, um, of course, it's very inefficient to be watering during the heat of the day because it evaporates, but watering at night or in early evening where the lawn would stay wet throughout the night can cause lawn diseases. So it's better if you have the ability to water early morning, kind of just as the sun is about ready to come up. Then the lawn will dry, the surface of the lawn will dry quicker, the leaf blades will dry quicker, and less chance of a disease on the lawn. Gosh, we could talk a whole hour about just lawn diseases. So we're already late August to mid-September. If you didn't get power raking or dethatching done in May, it can be done in August, mid-September. Can be done then. Same with core aeration. If you didn't get it done in May, September is a time that can be done too. Fall seeding. Fall seeding of lawns or filling in areas or a brand new lawn, fall seeding, as long as it's done before about September 15th, is the most successful time of year. The reason for that is in the fall of the year, the soil has warmed up all summer long and the soil is beautifully warm. You see, in the spring, in May, uh, grass seeding works fine too, but the soil is just coming off of winter and there's a lot of cold and chilly soil down below. Whereas in the fall, that whole soil profile is warm, ready to germinate. And there's less evaporation kind of in late August, early September, less weed pressure usually at that time. So fall seeding can be one of the most successful times to. Oh, and I love this one. Labor Day, fertilizing the lawn. Memorial Day and Labor Day. If you were to only fertilize your lawn once during the growing season, which would be the most important? Actually, it's Labor Day. The research has shown that Labor Day in September is the most important time to fertilize your lawn. And here's why. In the fall of the year, the coolness, the bright days of September, the coolness, usually we get some fall rains. That is when the lawn is creating the lawn grass, creating deep roots, and it's also filling out sideways. And so by providing it the nutrition in that active growth spurt, by giving it the nutrition of lawn fertilizer, you'll get a deeper root, the lawn will fill out sideways, and that will be very important for next year's healthy lawn. So by fertilizing in the fall, you are investing in the next year's healthy lawn. So it's not just about greening it up in the fall of the year. Let me show you an interesting photo here. This is our own lawn. This was taken a couple of years ago. Notice, okay, this is in the spring of the year. If you take a close look, the hedges are just, our alpine currant hedge is just, it's leafed out pretty good. The vines are just coming, shrubs are just starting to kind of get some leaves. So this was the spring of the year. I even see a dandelion blooming there. Okay, so this was spring of the year. Okay, if you see in the foreground up to about the light post, it's quite nice and green. Between that light post and the house, it's a much lighter green. Well, in the fall of the year in September, the fall before, I ran out of fertilizer. And I didn't go to the garden center to pick up any more because I guess I got busy. And this is what it looked like the next spring. The area that I fertilized in the front, nice and green and healthy, that uh, area that you can see as you look up towards the house, the lighter green, it was not as thick, not as nice. It took the entire summer for that to catch up. So it really was dramatic to me on how the fall fertilizing very, very important for the overall health of the lawn. So I can see why the researchers said that's number one. See, I'm kind of a hard learner. Experience is the best teacher, so I always say I'm kind of the perfect one to talk about some of these things because I've made every mistake that can be made. All right, now on to fall weed control. Then we got to get on to questions. So, fall weed control can be the best time for some of the hard to kill weeds like creeping Charlie, Canada thistle. In September, make sure you keep the mowing height 3 inches through September yet, because there's a lot of grass development growing. And then in October, gradually reduce the mowing height from about 3 inches down to 1.5. As the lawn is kind of starting to go dormant, then that's the time to reduce it. Sometimes you might need to bag it up if it wants to lay on the surface like a hayfield. And in October, leave the leaves and simply mow over them, mulch them down in. Research showed that the leaves add nutrition, suppresses weeds, conserves moisture. It's like adding a nice composty mulch over. So as long as after a couple of passes, you can see the grass blades, we don't want to smother it with a deep layer of leaves, but as long as after a couple of passes, it is mulched down in, you're actually adding good stuff down into your lawn. All right, let's just quickly look at some lawn alternatives. If maybe you'd like to try something else, there are some grasses that you don't have to mow. That's an alternative. Look at some kind of no-mow type grasses, or you can do ground covers, native prairie, beautiful, creeping junipers. That makes a good kind of ground cover. Clover. I love clover. Clover stays so beautiful and green. I love clover in our own lawn. Lawns in the 1940s and 1950s were considered elite if they had clover in the mix. Clover adds nitrogen to the lawn. The little white Dutch clover adds nitrogen to the lawn. It mixes with the lawn good. One thing I like is the rabbits will stay on my lawn and eat the clover instead of eating my tulips and lilies. So that gives them something to nibble on, and it just works so well with grass. So you might consider either a whole clover lawn or mixing clover into your existing lawn grass. That's wonderful for our pollinators, and like I say, it keeps my bunnies happy and out of my hair. Or you might consider doing a bee lawn. You can Google bee lawn from NDSU or bee lawn from University of Minnesota. Okay, so lawn care with less input. To summarize it up, mow high, 3 inches. You don't have to bag the clippings. Water not so often, but more deeply. Fertilize Labor Day for sure. Spot spray weeds. And of course, you got to know kind of at the end of the season when to say enough is enough and let winter come. Okay. And I always mention if you're in the mood to listen to gardening podcasts, just search online Growing Together, a gardening podcast. Forum reporter John Lamb and I, who enjoys gardening, we get together and do a weekly chat. And anytime you want more information, in fact, I'm going to leave that up for a little bit. If I can't explain your question in enough detail, feel free to email me, donald.kinzler, Kinzler at ndsu.edu. And now let me address the questions in the chat first. Does crabgrass preventer come in a spray or only in granules? It does come in a liquid form. In fact, some of the lawn care professionals will apply it in a liquid form. And of course, that's already activated. The dry granules have to have moisture applied. You could check online to see if you can find a liquid, but there are liquid types available as well. In South, the blades of grass are harsh to walk on, such as Bermuda grass. Yes, it's interesting. The southern grasses are totally different than our northern grasses because our grasses are termed cool season grasses. They love our relatively cool springs. Then we get a little bit of heat in summertime, but then it's cool again in the fall. And in the South, totally different. Yeah, and the blades of grass could be Bermuda grass. Krabbenhoft Seed and Supply. Thanks for mentioning that. Another good local supplier of grass seed. Krabbenhoft, Krabbenfot, Krabbenhoft Seed and Supply, Sabin, Minnesota. Thank you. Does crabgrass preventer need to be watered in right after application? Well, relatively soon after application. If irrigation system not hooked up in April, does one just sprinkle it in? Yes, sprinkle it in. So the preferred is immediately after or pretty soon after applying the granular crabgrass preventer, it would have moisture to activate. How do you deal with excessive amounts of nightcrawler hills? There are no there are no products legally labeled for nightcrawler control in the United States. Boy, and if anyone has ever walked on a lawn affected by night crawlers, it's like walking across golf balls. And so, um, power raking can level out the bumpiness, and then also tending to water deeply will help drive them down in. But there are no chemicals that are cleared for use to control night crawlers. With sandy soil, do you water half an inch twice a week? Yes. Half an inch twice a week on sandy soils. Can one safely use what can one safely use on lawn to deter neighbors' dogs? Hmm. Boy, I got nothing for that one. What can one safely use on lawn to deter neighbors' dogs? Well, I believe most of our municipalities have leash ordinances, so one would hope that the neighbor would respect your lawn enough so that the dogs are not going on your lawn, because that's totally unfortunate. But otherwise, I don't have any repellents that I know of that would keep a dog off of a lawn. When you spot kill the dandelions, what do you use for herbicide? Dandelions are one thing I like about dandelions. They are an introduced non-native species, and so they really go to town. And dandelions kill quite easily with simple 2,4-D amine. 2,4-D amine, which is one of the herbicides that breaks down relatively easily, but within about a day of application, dandelions are curling up and withering. So 2,4-D is a very effective herbicide for dandelions. I typically fertilize only in fall, and if we've had a dry summer, I skip fertilizing that year. Is that a good choice? Yeah, if a lawn is experiencing almost an entire growing season, including fall in drought, then it's not growing quickly enough or vigorously enough to need much fertilizing. So if a drought extends throughout the summer and into the fall, I think your idea of skipping fertilizer that year probably has some merit. If the moisture increases in fall, then it would be able to use the fertilizer. But I think you're definitely on the right track. First time I've joined for one of these, I thoroughly enjoyed. Thank you. I appreciate the comments. Just moved into a new house and there was no lawn. We had black dirt hauled in and had it seeded in 2025, last September. When should I use pre-emergence? How will standing water hurt the new grass? Well, if the grass is still dormant, then standing water won't affect it. If grass is actively growing, such as a summer heavy rain, then that can affect the lawn. But if the water is standing right now from kind of winter runoff and the grass is still dormant, I think it's going to be just fine. Hopefully, then when the soil thaws, the water will penetrate. Um, should I use fertilizer as you described today, even though it's new? There is a fertilizer. Um, so if you check where you buy lawn fertilizers, there's a fertilizer for newly seeded lawns. That would be the one to choose since the lawn was just put in last September. It's relatively new. So Scott's, for example, has a fertilizer right on the label. It says lawn fertilizer for newly seeded lawns. That would be the one that would give good nutrition without burning that. When the question back to your first part of the question, when should I use pre-emergent? I would let that lawn get a year old before I would do too much weed control on it. The weeds can be taken out taken out since the lawn has been established now. You've got time. I would let the lawn establish for a year first. If I haven't covered all of your questions um, regarding that one, please feel free to email me at my email. Does the city of Fargo allow a yard of clover? I believe they do. I can't say that with 100% certainty, but the city of Fargo, I believe, does allow a yard of clover. The city ordinances regarding lawn are primarily about the height of the material, the mowing height, and if one does a yard of other vegetation, there's certain heights. But a clover lawn, I've never seen anything addressed that would not give the ability to have a clover lawn in Fargo. Got a repair plan for dog on the lawn turning it yellow. Plenty of moisture, plenty of water, really getting that the excess ammonia watered down. Really, really good. And then reseeding. That's about the only solution that I've ever seen for dog damage. So glad to hear clover is elite. We've been frustrated. We have clover spreading in our lawn. Guess we'll just embrace it. Yes, as long as the rest of the grass stays nice and green, like I say, in the 40s and 50s, that was considered you were upper crust if you had clover in your lawn. Every year I get a light green thin grass that grows higher than the lawn, easily pulls out, but isn't affected by herbicide. I've tried. Any ideas? It's probably an annual type grass. Besides crabgrass, there are other annual type grasses. And crabgrass preventer, when you read the label, it also prevents other types of annual grasses. So you might read the label on the product, but as long as the crabgrass preventer on the label says it prevents, and then it'll list a bunch of other annual type grasses. So that would also then be applied around April 15th. What causes a lawn to become hard and bumpy? Probably night crawlers. Noticeable bumps when you're walking across the lawn are usually night crawlers. Core aeration or power raking, but there are no chemicals for night crawlers. If using liquid crabgrass preventer, does that need to also be watered in? No. Generally, the liquid crabgrass preventer is providing that blanket of protection. And so it's already in place and ready. The granules have to be liquefied, the granules have to be kind of made to become like the liquid product. And that's where the moisture has to come from. Any benefit to leaving deer excrement on lawn for nutrients? Probably not. It could kind of burn the area a little bit, could be a little localized burning. I don't think that leaving deer manure on the lawn would probably have a great many benefits, I don't believe. How much dry, interesting question though. How much dry grass should one leave on lawn for thatch? About 1/2 inch is what that kind of tannish thatch layer should be. Are your previous webinars available to view? Yes, to everyone who registered and joined, I'll send the entire playlist of all of the webinars. It also includes the ones I did last year. Dog repellent, I have found a product at Runnings. Good, I'm anxious to hear this. A product at Runnings Farm Store to help deter dogs. It worked pretty good, but once it rained, I needed to reapply. It got expensive. Yeah, and oftentimes many of the repellents after rain do need to be reapplied. So a dog repellent maybe doesn't mention the brand, but a dog repellent I found at Runnings Farm Store to deter dogs. Okay, thanks for that. I buy a bag of Kentucky bluegrass seed and mix into one without mulch or any Kentucky bluegrass seeds. And mix into one without mulch or any Kentucky bluegrass seeds. Some of the bags of kind of mulch that you apply have seed within them. And I think, Larry, maybe you're mentioning adding additional bluegrass seed to that, if I'm reading that right. That sounds like a good idea, Larry. Let's see. Okay, next. Were you able to look into crane flies and grass seed? No, I didn't get my homework done. 2 years I seeded, and after watering, a ton of crane flies appeared, and such a nuisance. Were hanging out on my siding surfaces, flying in face. Bug company sprayed my house and told me from watering grass seed. Crane fly larvae within. Gosh, I apologize that I didn't get my homework done. I did not look up crane flies. Uh, Okay, I see your name. Laura, I will try to reply back to you directly. I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, now let's go on to that's all the chats. Let me see the question and answer here. Is it okay to rake lawn of dog mess when the ground is frozen? Yes. Yep, dog mess, if you can just kind of rake the surface there to remove the dog mess without kind of tearing up the tender grass. That sounds perfect. You talked about voles, but what about moles in the lawn? Well, the voles are they look like a brownish field mouse without the tail, and they don't run nearly as fast as a house mouse. I've actually been able to outrun a vole, and I'm not that fast. Moles. Now, moles are an interesting creature that digs kind of a bigger hole, and moles need special traps, and there are mole repellents. But moles usually end up either having to be trapped or in the past, when I've recommended to people some mole control, I've had to do a little searching online to find some of the best suggestions. But uh, voles, for instance, voles there are probably hundreds of voles around attacking lawns, but usually moles are only one or two, I believe. So moles are a bigger creature that needs a little more a trapping type procedure. How do I get rid of ants in my lawn? I get several ant hills in diameter that kill the lawn in these spots. Yeah, because they do kind of mound up that area. And so when I've checked with the entomologists um, on ant control, they usually just recommend some of the insecticides, such as maybe granular 7 applied to that area, or the granular taro type um, ant killers, and then just to kind of knock down the mounds, to kind of try to get rid of that so it doesn't smother. Ant control in the lawn can be tough. They can be kind of tenacious to get rid of. Next question, if you use crabgrass preventer when soil is about 50 degrees and it gets activated by watering, can you still use the mowed grass clippings to mulch the garden that same spring? The Yes, you can. The crabgrass preventer creates a soil layer. And so that material is not taken up by the grass or is not on the grass itself. So using the grass clippings is fine, as opposed to if a if a liquid herbicide is applied to the grass and kind of clings to the grass, then those clippings are not safe to be used as mulch or on the garden. But crabgrass preventer is a different mode of action, and that is not taken up by the grass itself. My yard is extremely lumpy. What is the best way to correct this? Probably the night crawlers and a good power raking in May. It doesn't totally get rid of the night crawlers, but helps diminish. A number of questions about that. So power raking, dethatching, and try to water if you are irrigating, try to irrigate less often, deeper, to see if it can't get those night crawlers to go deeper into the ground and less at the surface. Do you know of a good brand of pre-emergent? Pre-emergent meaning the pre-emergent crabgrass killer. Um, you know, sometimes you do get what you pay for. Some of the name brands, the commercial, nationally known brands of chemicals can sometimes have a little more research behind their products. And so you might check, but again, the label, if you check the label and you're comparing labels, if they have the same active ingredients, then you should be safe. But again, sometimes certain companies might have a little more science behind them than generic brands. But again, the label would indicate if it's a true comparison. How do you get rid of how do you get rid of clover? Well, if clover is becoming more invasive than you do want, then clover's deep rooted. It's not easy to kill, but lawn weed herbicide repeatedly applied will kill clover. But again, it won't probably kill it in one. There is a an ortho product called clover, chickweed, and oxalis killer that has a little more potent ingredient if one does wish to remove clover from the lawn. What fertilizer formulation do you recommend? Are different fertilizations suggested for spring versus fall? In the fall, sometimes what is sold is called winterizer fertilizer, but NDSU indicates that the winterizer fertilizers are actually for the southern part of the United States. We can use the same fertilizer in spring and fall, but it's fine if you use the winterizer type 2. But that has sometimes has additional um, phosphorus and potassium that our soils maybe don't need. And so the fertilizer formulation, the main ingredient of lawn fertilizer is nitrogen, which is the first number in the three numbers. And uh, the higher the amount of nitrogen, you're getting a little more for your money probably with that. And you might even take a look. Some of the brands that might be a little more expensive have iron in, which can also assist in greening. So some of the name brands versus a generic, sometimes there will be difference in the amount of these products in that. So again, checking the labels helps you kind of compare whether you want a generic or a name brand. Are you previous winners available? I'm going to send to everyone probably within a day or so the whole playlist of the webinars. What is the best way to control Creeping Charlie? Creeping Charlie, hard to kill in May and again in September. Apply a lawn weed herbicide with active ingredient triclopyr, triclopyr for Creeping Charlie and other hard to kill weeds. Triclopyr applied in May and again in September. Do you like to apply a cover fabric after seeding? Does it help to keep the area moist, minimize weed introduction from windy days? Covering such as burlap was used over seed. It's very important to remove it though as the little grass is starting to sprout. If the grass grows up through some of these fabrics, including burlap, it can tear out the grass on removal. So it's important to make sure the cover fabric doesn't stay on too long. But the burlap has been used successfully too, as long as it's removed in time. How do I keep voles out of my yard? I think we discussed that. Rodent traps, um, poison baits put in PVC tubes. Sprinklers that come on for intruders, dogs, squirrels are a nice idea. I like that idea to keep squirrels and maybe the rabbits. They're used successfully for deer too. Sprinklers that come on and that are motion activated. What do I do with mushrooms in the lawn? Does it mean my soil is too acidic? No. Mushrooms growing in the lawn means that there's organic material down in the lawn, and organic material is good. Maybe there's an old tree root growing, or maybe in construction they buried a 2x4 out in the lawn. And after that organic material decomposes, the mushrooms will disappear. The mushrooms are just decomposing that material. The best thing to do is just rake away the mushroom when it appears. And see, the other thing you might, if you're continually bothered by mushrooms, you might try either core aerating or power raking. That'll get a little more air down into the turf profile, and a little more air will help break down the organic material on which the mushrooms are growing. But the mushrooms are generally quite innocent, unless you're seeing like rings of grass and kind of odd looking um, things going on in your lawn. But if it's just the mushroom cap, then the organic material will eventually break down. They should disappear. I buy a bag of thanks, Larry. I buy a bag of Kentucky bluegrass seed to mix into grass seed without it, or very little Kentucky bluegrass. Yeah, thanks for replying back, Larry. That helps clarify. Any thoughts on using natural fertilizer from sewage plants such as Milorganite and applying it more often? A friend says to feed the soil instead of the plant. I like Milorganite. If you're familiar with that, it's sold at national chains and farm supply stores and garden centers. It's a it actually comes from Milwaukee sewage plant, Milorganite, but it's not a an icky type product. It's wonderful. I've used it on our lawn. It's a nice organic type fertilizer. Has good results, and also it's been known to repel deer and rabbits out of lawns and yards too. When you check the label, it tells how much to apply. It can be used on trees, shrubs, flower gardens as well, not for vegetables. And but it's a good product. You apply it similar to what you do other fertilizer type things. And again, it's you would not know its origin. And like I say, it's a good safe product. And yeah, it's a good alternative. So anyway, I do think. I do think we've reached the end of all of our questions. And I am going to write down your name, Laura, on the crane flies to see if I can track down what crane flies are. Count the day lost. You don't learn something new because I don't know anything about crane flies. I'll probably consult with our extension entomologist to see the story behind that. But I will look up your email and try to get back to you. And now, thank you. We've gone almost an hour and a half, so I thank you and I appreciate all of you very, very much. Again, I'll send out the entire playlist of the webinars that I've done this spring, and it also includes the one that I did last year, if there are any of those that you might. So again, thank you all very much. I really appreciate your tuning in, and I hope you enjoy these as much as I enjoy visiting with all of you. Thank you.